Good day, everyone. Before we start our today's discussion, I would like to introduce ourselves first. My name is Efraim F. Manzon.
I am Jandayan Buca.
I am Jandayan.
I am Henry L. Jaype.
I am Patrick F. Aparte.
I am Clent, Gerald, Silvano.
I am Bryan named Sumeguin.
I am Japp Alvarez.
And together, we are the Group 1.
So in today's discussion, we're gonna talk about the self from the perspective of the various philosophers. But specifically, we're gonna learn about their contributions towards understanding the self. From the first and second triumvirate, Plato's tripartite soul theory, towards Anthony de Mello, Aristotle's, Socrates, and St. Augustine's contributions.
On today's discussion, we will talk about the self from the perspective from the various philosophers. But before we dig in, let's first define what is triumvirate. Basically, triumvirate is composed of three men that has power in Rome before. Now we know what is triumvirate, so now let's dig in. There is two triumvirate, the first triumvirate and the second triumvirate. The first triumvirate that led by three powerful political alliance, and that is Pompey, Julius Caesar, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, which began in 60 to 53 BCE. The first triumvirate was formed with the intention of putting these three philosophers under a one banner to bypass all the opposition they would encounter in their future goals. The second triumvirate was Tres Virere Publicae Constituendae, meaning a triumvirate for organizing the state. This title was started in 43 BC for almost 5 years and renewed in 37 BC for another 5. The three men under the second triumvirate was Mark Antony, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, and Octavian, or known as the future Emperor Augustus. These three men wanted to control Roman Republic. Julius Caesar was the first ruler of Rome and got assassinated in 44 BCE. He has a close ally named Lepidus and Mark Antony, his nephew's adopted son, and the designated heir was a young man named Octavian. So in that day, the triumvirate was begun and renewed in 28 BCE. So now let's talk more about the Greek ancient triumvirate, which is Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. May I call Jandayan and Jandayan Buca to continue the topic?
Okay, so now let's talk about Plato's theory of virtue, or commonly known as the tripartite soul theory. But first, what is this theory? In the ancient Greek times, Plato derives the lessons and advices he receives from the teachings of Socrates and writes it in his books. In this topic, we specifically talk about one of his books called The Republic. Written in it describes that in each and every person, there lies a tripartite soul, considered the most essence of a person, which means each person's soul is divided into three parts. And these parts are in different balance from one person to another, and decides how a person behaves. Plato describes the three different parts as the logical part, otherwise known as logistikon, the spirited part, or thymoides, and lastly the appetite, or epithymikon. This explanation will help you understand what each of these parts entails. The first one is the rational part, or the logistikon. Symbolizes the mind and represents the ruling class. A rational mind thinks, analyzes, and gauges options for the best outcome of any given situation. It denotes consciousness, awareness, and works for the benefit of the entire soul, thus making it wise. The ruling class is always superior as they take optimum decisions for the welfare of society as a whole and rationally rule their kingdoms. Hence, they fall in this category. This part of the soul loves the truth and seeks to learn it. In other words, this is the part of the soul that loves logic, logical reasoning, and rational learning.
The second part is the spirited or thymoides, or in Greek meaning thumos, also commonly spelled themos. It's a Greek word expressing the concept of spiritedness, as in spirited stallion or spirited debate. The word indicates a physical association with breath or blood, and is also used to express the human desire for recognition. It is not a somatic feeling or noisy ungiddiness. Basically, the second part of the soul is that Plato believes symbolizes virtue above all things. The last part of Plato's theory is the appetite or epithmetikon, which is the last part of Plato's theory that symbolizes the common desire of a man. Now, let's move to our next philosopher, which is Aristotle. Efraim?
Aristotle was a great philosopher, and some of his notable works includes Nicomachean, Ethics, Politics, Metaphysics, Poetics, and Prior Analytics. He is also the first genuine scientist in the history because of his works. He made a pioneering contribution to all fields of philosophy and science. He invented the field of formal logic, and he identified the various scientific disciplines and explored the relationship of each other. The name Aristotle meaning the best purpose. Let's now talk about the contribution of Aristotle in the field of philosophy, and that is the formal logic. So you might ask me, what is formal logic? Formal logic is the use of syllogism to explain those connections between two premises. So what is syllogism? Syllogism is a form of reasoning which draws conclusion based on two given premises. In each syllogism, there are two premises and one conclusion that is drawn based on the given information. So we have an example here. As you can see in the slide, all spiders have 8 legs. Black widows are the type of spiders. As you can see, there is a two premises here, which is all spiders have 8 legs, and the other one is black widows are the type of spiders. So in a formal logic, you can conclude the two given premises as one, and that is black widows have 8 legs. So now let's go to the next slide. Can you continue, Bryan?
So we have here Saint Augustine. Augustine's sense of self is his relation to God, both in his recognition of God's love and his response to it. Achieved through self-presentation, then self-realization, he believed one could not achieve inner peace without finding God's love. Augustine's view was that God selects only a few people to receive grace and be saved. The rest of humanity will just continue to sin and not repent, and then they will be punished for it after death in hellfire. Originally, according to Augustine, we were equally free to choose between good or evil. But humans are now constantly attracted towards evil. That is, toward excessive satisfaction of lower desires for material things and pleasures. We can only escape from inherited sinfulness if we receive grace from God. So, for us, in order to escape from our sin, we need God's grace. And then there is no way we can earn such grace or force God to give it to us by being good. Furthermore, not all Christians' belief system are right. St. Augustine, often labeled as the first psychologist, although he was also a superb philosopher who studied a political system and the idea of morality. Moreover, he believed that no knowledge is impression that represents the self, because to be aware of an impression that represents the self, we must already be conscious of it. Unique entity. See Painter's sum. If I am mistaken, I exist. Response to a philosophical position known as skepticism. Skepticism is the view that says no knowledge is possible beyond what one knows by immediate sense experience, and some extreme positions that even knowledge-based sense experience is impossible. He also claimed that human knowledge would be impossible if God did not illumine the human mind and thereby allow it to see, grasp, or understand ideas. So, illumine means to enable one to understand, especially in a spiritual sense. That's all for St. Augustine. Can I call for Japp and Clent to continue the slide, please?
So perhaps his greatest contribution to the education is the use of the Socratic method. With this method, the teacher can make the student sharpen his reasoning faculty, improve his own. To solve a problem, it is broken down into series of questions, the answers to which gradually distill the answer a person would seek, still used today. This method is a way of breaking down a problem into a series of questions, where the answers gradually distill the answer a person is looking for.
Knowledge of virtue is necessary to become virtuous, and in turn that virtue is necessary to attain happiness. So according to Socrates, if one devoted themselves to self-knowledge and philosophical inquiry, they would soon be led to more appropriate view of the good. There is one supreme good, he claimed, and possession of this good alone will secure our happiness. And this supreme good, thought Socrates, is virtue. Virtue is defined as moral excellence, and an individual is considered virtuous if the character is made up of the moral qualities that are accepted as virtues. So, Socrates held virtue to be the greatest good in life because it alone was capable of securing one's happiness. He thought that when one arrived at the correct definition of virtue, one would come to realize that virtue is the only thing which is good. And since human beings naturally desire the good, as it alone secures happiness, with this knowledge, one would have no choice but to become virtuous. Exhortation to care for your soul. One's true self, according to Socrates, is not to be identified with what we own, with our social status, our reputation, or even with our body. Instead, Socrates famously maintained that our true self is our soul. According to Socrates, it is the state of our soul or our inner being which determines the quality of our life. Thus, it is paramount that we devote a suitable amount of attention, energy, and resources to making our soul as good and beautiful as possible. After coming to the realization that one's inner self or soul is all important, Socrates believed the next step in the path towards self-knowledge was to obtain knowledge of what is good and what is evil, and in the process use what one learns to cultivate the good within one's soul and purge the evil from it. That's all, and let's move on to the next slide.
Our last philosopher is Anthony de Mello. Who? Anthony de Mello? Anthony de Mello, also known as Tony de Mello, was an Indian Jesuit priest and psychotherapist, a spiritual teacher, writer, and public speaker. De Mello wrote several books on spirituality and hosted numerous spiritual retreats and conferences. He continues to be known for his storytelling, which drew from the various mystical traditions of both East and West, and for introducing many people in the West to mindfulness-based practices is sometimes called awareness prayer. Now, may I call Henry to continue the slide and give us the contribution of Anthony de Mello?
Anthony de Mello is one of the writers who has sold the most books on spirituality. His main influence were Buddhist master Aditya and philosopher Judy Krishnamurti. One of de Mello's most inspiring work is One Minute Wisdom, which was published in 1985. The book contains over 200 parables and lessons on how to live a full yet simple life, and it leads the reader to a new level of contemplation, which leads to love and harmony. His work was primarily about awakening people to the reality and proclaiming the awareness of message. Seeing people is the light they are to themselves and others, and acknowledging that they are better than they thought. Exhorted his audience to seek God behind all concepts, words, and religions. Through his best-selling books, over 2 million copies sold worldwide, and a large collection of recorded lectures. He wrote 18 books in total, which inspire millions of people around the world. And that's all for Anthony de Mello.
And that is the end part of our discussion. So again, we are the Group 1 and thank you for standing by. Have a good day.